Hello, everyone, and welcome to Digital Hammurabi for another wonderful interview. I hope you are all doing well, and I am Megan, your host. You will probably not hear an awful lot from me today because Hannah here has an amazing PowerPoint that I want to get through. So I'm just going to pass right over to her to introduce herself. I will say before we get started that we have, Hannah has generously provided a fantastic bibliography with lots of information. If this is a topic that interests you, check out the video description. You can read a lot more there. And there is also a link to her GoFundMe page. Hannah will tell us more about that later. But if you have a couple of extra dollars, pounds, euros, whatever it is you get paid in, I know it would be much appreciated and go to a very good cause. So Hannah, thank you. You please take it away.
Thank you, Meg, again. So as Megan said, I am Hannah Mail, and I did an interview on this channel before where I talked about the types of evidence that we have for women in ancient Egypt and gender overall. So the way that I have organized this PowerPoint is by the types of questions and types of themes that I talked about during that first interview. As Megan said, I am also raising money for an online Egyptology program so that I can do this sort of thing full time. So I am going to start the PowerPoint, and I'm going to start with just a sort of little bit of background on ancient Egypt overall. So Egypt has, in terms of its geography, it has a couple of natural barriers to, at the very least, large scale invasion by armies on foot. So on either side, it has the deserts, and then on the actual Nile River, it has the Nile cataracts as well. And those are areas in the Nile River where the current is particularly fast, and there's also these rock formations. So it makes it really hard for boats to, at least again in large numbers, get over those cataracts. So those two things combined really have given pharaonic Egypt a lot of time to develop their own culture and be safe from the sort of large scale regular type of invasions and warfare that you see, for instance, in Mesopotamia. One of the things that you'll also see in Egyptian culture and in their literature and in their art is this sense of duality. So you have these sort of arid desert areas that are viewed as kind of the land of the dead and sort of where the deceased go on sort of their next stage of life. And then you have these lush delta regions. So in Egyptian literature, for instance, you'll find that contrast is something that's reflected on a lot. And then something else that you'll also see in Egyptian culture is this division between Upper and Lower Egypt. So because of the way that the Nile runs, Upper Egypt or Lower Egypt is actually up here. So it's the Delta region where Giza and where Cairo and where really the more fertile parts are. And then Upper Egypt is actually down. So it's where Thebes and modern Luxor are. And particularly in royal iconography and terminology, you'll see the monarch on the throne hailed as king of Upper and Lower Egypt over and over. So this is just a drawing of what a Egyptian village may have looked like after the Nile has just come in and receded. So we have the canals that would actually water the individual fields, and then we have scenes of the actual planting that would be probably going on, and then we have some of the types of houses that these villages would probably have had as well. And then off in the distance there, you see the main Nile River itself as well. So because of the dams that were put in to modern Egypt, particularly the Aswan Dam, we've lost a lot of what that annual Nile flooding looked like, and how it regularly changed the Egyptian landscape. So this is some pictures of some of the more marshy delta regions as they currently now are in Egypt. But again, when the Nile was doing its regular annual flood, many more regions of Egypt would, look like this, particularly in the delta. There would be these multiple pockets of this fertile, more wetter land. This is the Nile watershed as it stands now. So you see that it's there in the delta, and then it goes it starts all the way in modern Ethiopia now. So that's, I think, where the origin of it is. And then this map here just shows its shift over time, because the Nile has shifted its flow and has shifted its banks over the past couple thousand years as well. So that's what this map is. So the different colors are the different times spans for when those shifts in the Nile actually occurred. And then this is a map showing you where the cataracts are. So it's not as clear as I would like, but where the numbers are, those are the 6 major cataracts on the actual Nile River. So you have the first one here that is in modern day Aswan. So in pharaonic times, this was sort of the border between Egypt and what they called Nubia, which broadly speaking is modern day Sudan. And then as you go further down into modern day Sudan, you see the rest of those major cataracts pop up as well. And then this is a picture again from the modern day, showing you what that first cataract, so the one by Aswan, so here, looks like. So you see those rock formations, and then there's rocks sort of under there as well. So again, those are only passable by ship parts of the year. And what you really have to do is someone has to, if the water is too high, then someone has to drag that ship, via a barge type thing over those rocks, or take that ship apart, go over the bank, and then once you're past that cataract, then reassemble the ship. So again, this does prevent, large scale navies from coming down into Egypt and really doing invasion or incursions on a regular basis. And then this is just one of these other cataracts, again from the modern day, but this also gives you a little bit of a glimpse of those contrasts that even though the annual flood of the Nile is no longer there, it's still present in Egypt, just not to as great an extent. So you see that fertile area, and then behind that more dry, deserty region as well. And then this again is showing you the course of the Nile. Also, this is that delta region. And part of the issue in terms of gender and the types of information that we can get is that this is where for thousands of years people have really lived. So we don't get a lot of daily life information and regular everyday settlement archaeology here, because people keep reusing these areas of land. So the types of gender archaeology and then settlement archaeology that we can get tend to be in the Upper Egyptian area. So where ancient Thebes, so you see that here, and current modern day Luxor is. So this is, for instance, it's within this region that Deir el-Medina is, which is a site that I talked about last time. So that is a site that was built to house the workmen and their families who built the valleys of the kings and queens. And so because it's in that desert type, more drier environment, more daily life type items are preserved. You get more papyri and legal documents where women show up that are preserved as well. The disadvantage with Deir el-Medina in sites like it is because it was built for a particular purpose. It's hard to know how much to sort of extrapolate what we find to, basic Egyptian villages in the Delta region that weren't built for that particular purpose. And this is in Lower Egypt. This is where we get a lot of our old kingdom funerary information, because it's where the Giza plateau is. So it's where the Great Pyramid is, and it's also where we have a lot of high status mastabas, which are old kingdom private tombs. And so a lot of these mastabas in Giza were built for the male official, but then his wife and or members of his family were buried with him as well. So it's through objects that were made for him and members of his family, including the female members of his family, that we get a good chunk of our information for the lives of elite women in Old Kingdom Egypt. And then this is just a quick chronology of pharaonic Egypt, because the objects that I'm going to go over span from the pre-dynastic to the late New Kingdom. So I just wanted to give a very quick overview of kind of what happened during those 3,000 plus years. So the pre-dynastic period is before Egypt is unified as a state. So it is when we have different cultures that are all along the Nile River. And then by the time you get to the Naqada period, which is further subdivided into Naqada 1 through 3, you have the people that are now settled in the Nile Valley, but they're still sort of figuring out the building blocks of what will become Egypt. And so it's sometime around towards the end of Naqada 3, which is around 3500 BCE, that we have the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. And the Egyptian legend coming from sort of later times is that was done by a king called Menes, so Menes, and he supposedly built Memphis, the first capital of Egypt, in the Delta region. Archaeologically, we haven't found a King Menes anywhere, but we have found a King Narmer and some other early kings. And so part of the scholarly debate is sort of how those early kings fit into this Menes sort of founding myth figure person. And so then after you have state unification, you have the early dynastic period. So Egypt is now a unified state, and you have the first kings and possibly a female pharaoh that rule over both Upper and Lower Egypt. But writing and how the royals present themselves are still sort of being worked out. And so then you get to the Old Kingdom, and there's debate within Egyptology over where exactly the early dynastic ends and the Old Kingdom begins. But depending on the Egyptologists that you talk to, the early dynastic is dynasties 1 through 2 or 1 through 3. And then the Old Kingdom is dynasties 3 through 4, sometimes 2 through 4. And so it's the Old Kingdom that's also called the Pyramid Age, because it's when the Giza Plateau was used as the main royal burying ground, and pyramids were the main form of royal burial tomb. And then you have the first breakup of the organized state. Egyptologists are still trying to figure out exactly why. And so that leads to the first intermediate period, where you have competing parts of Egypt that, are all vying for power, and different local dynasties. And the first intermediate period is ended by Mentuhotep II, who starts out as one of these members of a local dynasty from Thebes, the 11th dynasty, but he eventually goes out and re-expands Egypt. So it's his reign that ushers in the Middle Kingdom. And then the centralized crown starts to lose power again, and so then there's this next period of state fragmentation, which gets us to the second intermediate period. That second intermediate period is again ended by another local dynasty from Thebes, the 17th dynasty. So again, they come up and reunify and reconquer the whole of Egypt, and that ushers in the new kingdom. And most of the pharaohs that people sort of know about come from that new kingdom period. And then again, towards the end of the new kingdom, the centralized monarchy starts to lose its grip on power, which then gets us into that third intermediate period. And then towards the end of the third intermediate period, there is a final period of unification, and that's the late period. And broadly speaking, the late period coincides with Egypt's most direct foreign engagement. So you have some of the late period pharaohs use for instance Greek mercenaries. So it's also when you see Egypt starting to develop as kind of this touristy spot. So it's when Herodotus wrote or supposedly came to Egypt and wrote his thoughts down about it. So very briefly, that's 3,000 plus years. And there's a lot of other stuff that happens, but those are the basics. So these are some vocab words from a site that I think is also in the description box as well. So it's called Step by Step Hieroglyphics, and it has hieroglyphic grammar lessons, but it also has a searchable dictionary with hieroglyphic words. So that's where these come from. So the Egyptian word that we use for queen is actually not quite a direct translation. So this is the word, and these commas are different ways in hieroglyphs of writing that same word. So there's 3 different combinations that they give you that you may see on different text and objects. So the word that we use for queen, if you really want to directly translate it, it's actually king's wife. So this dotted HMT is this hieroglyph part here, and this is the wife part. And then this NSW is this hieroglyph here, and that's the king or king's part. So that's one of our issues with working with Egyptian art and how it relates to gender, is some of the words that we translate as queen don't actually have that type of translation in the original Egyptian sources. And then this is their word for queen regent. So someone who stepped up when the tended to be, male heir was too, young to take those reins. And so most of the, or a good number of the instances that we have for that happening come from the new kingdom. But then, as I talked about before last time, we also have some of the female pharaohs that get their start in that way as well. So for instance, in the Middle Kingdom, we have, in the New Kingdom, we have Hatshepsut. So she first came into power as one of these queen regents for her nephew, and then she eventually claimed full and equal co-rule. And then in the later New Kingdom, we have the female pharaoh Tausrit that originally came to power in the same way. And then back in the Old Kingdom, we have, I think it's either Pepi the First or Pepi's the Second's mom, that when he was too young to first take up the reins of power, she ruled on his behalf at first. So she was one of these politically powerful queen regents, but she never took that next step of claiming the full pharaonic power. When he was old enough to take that full power, she let it go. So this hieroglyph here is the J, and then this part from here to here is the TYT, and then this here is a determinative. So in Egyptian, you have the actual hieroglyphics, so that's this part, but then you have a class of objects or signs that are called determinative. So they're not meant to be read as one of the hieroglyphic letters, but they tell you what class of objects that word sort of falls into. And I'm just looking at the time, and since we're in, I'm going to go to some of the objects. So the other thing to know about the hieroglyphic language is that it lacked vowels, and it just had consonants. And so these links are from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and so they are scarabs, and they have the names of actual women who lived. So Hathor, Nebita Wadjet, but in the hieroglyphic, or in that object, they have that term lady or mistress of the house that I talked about in the last interview as well. So you have a little bit or a little snippet of information about this woman who actually lived in Egypt, but then the object really talks or relates more to her domestic role. So one of the points that I raised in my last interview is that a good chunk of the evidence that we have for gender and women in ancient Egypt is written by or for elite men. And so it's in those contexts that women or gender comes up. So that includes things like tombs. So I've talked about how from the Old Kingdom on, what you tend to get is the tomb is built for the male official or sort of male head of the household, and then his family, which includes his wife and daughters, are buried with in that same tomb. So at Deir el-Medina, for instance, there's multiple family tombs of that kind. And then I talked about last time how in terms of literature, we have these texts that are called wisdom texts. So they seem to be written for the scribal class as kind of a guide for life. And with in that you see things pop up about women and how to treat your wife and things like that, but they're coming through with this male voice. And then in terms of objects, you have stele. So again, usually the person that commissioned or paid for the stele and is the main focus of that is the male official or male scribe of some kind. And then within that stele, different members, including female members of his family, get mentioned or named. So this is an example of the Middle Kingdom. So this is a set of letters that are in papyrus form, and they're held in the Metropolitan. So they come or they seem to be written by a farmer or well-off gentleman named Heck in Ket. And so within these letters that talk about his farm and are to certain of his officials telling them what to do, we get these hints of what his actual household is like and his female members that live with in that household. So this particular letter 4 seems to be to this workshop overseer person, and you have, I think it's Heckanet's daughter that is mentioned here, and then it also goes down a little bit later on into because this is from another letter. So this seems to be a conflict about Heckanet's housemaid Sen in that seems to be having difficulty or causing tension within the household. And so Heckanet has been notified of this state of affairs, and so his solution is to let the maid servant go. So that's what this letter is talking about. Is it's to either his wife or whichever household official is in charge of the servants, and it's telling them to get rid of this troublesome woman. So we get a little hint of maybe some of the household dynamics that actually went on in a what we would call maybe a middle class-ish household, and the types of conflicts that could arise, which also speaks to what I talked about in the last interview, where in ancient Egypt, in particular, your day-to-day life as a woman and how good it was really seemed to depend more on your economic station and class rather than your gender. So you have these elite women that are well off. They have lots of power with in the household because they are the wives of these officials. But then you have their female servants that, especially in the New Kingdom, could maybe be slaves that were actually captured, from foreign territories and brought into Egypt. And so you had those power imbalances that then developed between, those women as well. And so this is a chunk from those same letters, and it seems to be from Hecka.net, talking about, say hi to my mom as well. So that seems to imply that his mom is living within his household, which then leads to another question of what did widows do in ancient Egypt, because we do see them surface every so often. And it does seem that if their husband died, they could go back to live in the household, of their son. And of course, in terms of economics, the more likely that was to happen was among those were well off. If you were an average farmer way down on the social scale, maybe you just had enough to support your family, and in terms of food, and your mom, if her husband died, was sort of on her own in terms of support. Because one of the pieces of advice that's given to monarchs, and something that both they and male officials boast about, is that they have taken care of the widows. They have made sure that they've been fed and are safe. So there does seem to be an awareness in Egyptian society that widows are a particularly vulnerable economic group. So this is an object from that step-by-step hieroglyphics site, because they do have a let's read tab. So they've taken objects, some of which have to do with women and gender overall, and they've put the hieroglyphic inscription and then the English translation there as well, for those who want to get that type of practice. So this talks about a royal woman, so one that's very high on the social scale. So it's from it's an upper obelisk of King Pepi II, but it talks about his daughter. So this part here is the cartouche that has Pepi the first name, and then these chunks here are talking about his daughter. And so this is the king's daughter part. So king's daughter. And then this, I think, is either her name or it's the determinative, but the forward slide thing is blocking some of those hieroglyphics. This is a zooming in on a stele from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And as I said, these stele, which you see some in the Old Kingdom, but even more starting in the Middle Kingdom and then into the New. They are usually made or commissioned by a male official. So in this case, it's the steward Mentuwosar. So that's who you see here. So this is just his feet, but on the stele itself, it's him sitting in front of the offering table here. That's the main register. But then towards the bottom, so down here, you have members of his family that are actually named and ideally included in the offering formula as well, so that when they pass on, they also will be given sustenance to sustain them in the afterlife. So we have this woman here, and she's Mentuwosar's daughter. So that's what these hieroglyphics here are. So they give his daughter, his beloved, and then her name D Dit, and then born of Nefer Hesket. So this is telling you what his wife's name is, because it's this woman, it's his daughter's mom. And something else that you'll see on a lot of these stele, but you just don't see in this particular chunk here, it is many times male officials will name their mothers as well. So they'll say, the male official's name and then born of ... So you'll get a little bit of that female lineage in terms of the grandmother as well. So this is another stele. This is from the Middle Kingdom, and it's from Bidos, which is more in Upper Egypt, so more in that deserty region. And in the Middle Kingdom, Bidos became a pilgrimage site. So you have lots of stele that were set up there because of that. So from those stele, we've gotten a lot of this biographical information. So you have the official who paid for this object here. So it's the overseer of the troops, Sacerdotal, and then members of his family in mama form, so his children, and I think some extended members of his family as well. So this is him again. So it's that same male official that's up here, but he's just in mummified form. And then next to him, you see a woman that is given that Lady of the House title, and her name Dejethotep. So that's what these hieroglyphs are here. So the assumption is that she is his wife, but I don't know that for sure, since there's no hieroglyphs that explicitly say that. And then you have their children and some of their more distant relatives here as well. So that is their daughter here. And so the hieroglyphs are not quite as clear as I would like, but it's this part up here that says his daughter, and then it gives her name as well, Sat on Ku. And then from right to left, so the rest of these figures here, you have in terms of female members of the family, you have Sesh May, daughter of Set on Ku. So in modern terms, this guy's niece, so that's her here. Or sorry, I think it's her here, because you also have the sons of the family listed as well. And then another, I think his granddaughter, because it's Seni Beast, daughter of Gif It. And one of the helpful things for the Metropolitan Museum collection online search is that a lot of their stele lays, in particular, their inscriptions have been translated on the actual object page. So for Mentuoser's stele lay, for example, if you were to click on that link, it would take you to the page for that particular object, and then you scroll down, and then there is a tab that says translation, and you click on that tab, and it gives you the full translation. So that's where I got this, those here, and then this info here as well, in terms of who those people are. This is another stele lay that was also found at Baidos. So it's another case where the stele lay was made for a man named Ruhar Darzin, and it's his brother that commissioned the stele lay. So you have in that top part, you have the offering formula, and then this is his brother. This is in front of the offering table, the Rei Hujarsen. And then down here is the extended family list that includes the female members of the family that hope to share in these offerings and sustenance for the afterlife as well. And then also on that bottom part, it gives the name of, I think it's Ruhar Jessen's wife. And so that's what these hieroglyphs here are. So again, this is another case where the object itself is made for a man or a member of the male elite, but then within that, you get this biographical information about members of his family as well. And so that's what this chunk is it's the offering, so down here, of these members of his family, including the female members that hope to share in the offerings. And by being set up at a Baidos, they also become known to other families and other people that pass by that stele lay and can read hieroglyphics that may be compelled to make offerings to their spirits as well. So we have his daughter. And then we have his wife, that this, I think, is even further back, his wife's mom. And then his son and his son's wife, and then their daughter, so his granddaughter. And then some other female members of his family here. So again, it gives you the sense that, yes, Egyptian society was patriarchal, but women were still considered important enough to trace back that family lineage, and to have their names included on these types of objects. This is some murals that are from New Kingdom tombs. So this again is from a male tomb. So the tomb of Ka in Har-Ka. So one of these officials of the New Kingdom. And on his tomb walls, you see members of his family here. So this, I think, is him with his wife and another maybe female member of his family, and then some of his children here. And this is a type of scene that we see a lot in some New Kingdom tombs, is these daily life scenes. We also see these banqueting scenes. So these, are high status, high class women that are at these banquets, and then these are female servants. So again, you see the different economic niches that women could occupy, and the different types of different levels of power that they may have had. And so this is the servant. One of the ways that you can tell that she is of lower status is that she's smaller than these four women here. She's also not clothed, and if you look, her breasts are a little bit saggy. She doesn't look perfect and youthful like these women do. So those are all things that cue you into, this is someone that's serving these women, and is lower down on the social scale. So again, with this image, Nacht or Nacht is the male official's tomb that this image is taken from. This is another one of these banquet scenes from the tomb of Nabu Men. So again, you see the women that are having fun at the party, and being wined and dined, and then some of the serving women there as well. And then just the same thing here. But these types of images also are one of our clues that women had an active social life outside of the home. So they went to parties. They had the ability to mingle with men. They weren't confined to the home, and you don't see even really this ideal of strict segregation by sex that, for instance, you see in classical Athens. So this is a chunk from one of these wisdom texts. So the particular text is called the Precepts of Ptah-hotep. And I see, Megan, that we're going down on time. So should I finish with this slide, or?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Okay. So this, as I said, is from the precepts of Tahoe Tep. So it's giving advice for how you should treat your wife. So if you are wise, love your wife without a loy, treat her well. But then also, if you go to the end, there's a little hint here that maybe domestic violence and domestic abuse occurred, because it says, be not brutal, tact will influence her better than violence. So this is one of the sort of hints that we have, that yes, the ideal was that you treat your wife well, and you keep her in comfort, but that doesn't mean that women or that husbands and wives were equal, and husbands did sometimes lash out. And we have scattered evidence from some of the Deir al-Medina legal records that we have for some domestic abuse that maybe some of those wives endured as well. So I think this is the slide that I'm going to end on. And I don't see any questions.
We had a couple of very quick ones that we can cover. I'm sorry, everyone, we won't be able to take more questions than have already been put in the chat, because I can hear my 4-year-old running riot outside, which generally means it's time for me to finish and slink away. But Bernardo was asking if king's wife was a title for all of the king's wives or just his primary wife.
It seems to be just for his primary wife. So it's really only in the New Kingdom that we get a lot of evidence for kings having multiple wives. And then a little bit earlier on in the Middle Kingdom, Mentuhotep II has a sort of harem, or what's been referred to as a harem of women that appear to be some of his wives, but there's debate over that as well.
Thank you. This is more of a comment than a question, but I'd like to get your thoughts on it as well. Beach says she gets the impression that if a woman didn't have a man, then we probably wouldn't know about her. Does that seem accurate?
I think it's accurate for probably a woman that's not an elite woman. Because if you have female pharaohs or princesses, usually in their burials, you have information that just sort of focuses on them. But if you're an average Egyptian farmer, probably unless some male member of your household has dealings with either the law or sort of the outside world that concerns you, not a lot of your biographical information is going to be preserved. From the pre-dynastic, we do have female burials. So that is another way that we can get at women's lives. And that is where we get a lot of our information that just focuses on the women as well. But that's also one of our signs that from the early days of Egypt, a woman was considered important enough to have space and attention devoted to just her burial. And we don't necessarily need, that larger male context. And I think Alice Stevenson does a fair amount of work on pre-dynastic mortuary archaeology and how it relates to gender.
Thank you very much. And before we say goodbye, could you give everyone a little bit of information about your GoFundMe, what you're raising money for, and everyone, again, if you are interested in helping Hannah out, the link is across the bottom of your screen. It's in the video description, and it will also be the pinned comment on this video on YouTube. So it will be very easy to find.
So I am raising money for an online Egyptology program. It is a master's program through the University of Manchester. So it is a part-time 2-year fully online program, and it will give me that master's in Egyptology that I need, and I can then apply to PhD programs in Egyptology, because my ultimate goal is to become a curator of ancient Egyptian art, and hopefully research subjects and things related to women in ancient Egypt as well.
Thank you. And for those viewers in America, the USA, who are watching, and this sounds a little bit weird, it's very common in the UK especially, and a lot of the rest of Europe, to have a master's degree before you apply to your PhD. Very, very rarely do British universities take people for PhD programs without a master's degree. So this step is absolutely vital for Hannah to continue on in her dream of becoming a curator of Egyptian art. So again, the link is pretty much everywhere that this video is. Please, if you can, help support Hannah. It is, again, expensive. There is very little funding in the UK, little funding anywhere, but having gone through a master's program in the UK, I can tell you there is no funding. So it's important to be able to pay for this yourself. So Hannah, thank you again for coming and sharing your research and your passion with us. It's been an absolute delight. And everybody else, thank you for staying. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your wonderful questions. And until next time, resist poor scholarship. Always ask, how do you know that? Digital Hammurabi is made possible by generous sponsorship from our patrons. Their support means that we have the technological and academic resources necessary to bring the ancient world directly to you. If you want to join the team, go to patreon.com/Digital Hammurabi to see how you can help.